Welcome to this week's State Secrets podcast. I'm your host, Cipher Brief CEO and publisher Suzanne Kelly. Over the last few episodes, we've been talking with national security leaders and others who are being honored at this year's Cipher Brief Honors Dinner. It's an annual DC gala that celebrates the national security community and recognizes leaders across a number of categories for their outstanding work. This week, we're catching up with Vice Admiral Frank Whitworth, who's being honored at this year's dinner for innovation in government. As director of the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, Whitworth has been at the helm of incorporating public sector technologies into the broader intelligence mission and sharing NGA's analysis with both the Pentagon and the intelligence community. AI, of course, plays a starring role, which we talk about. You know, NGA's mission was once to map the world. Today, it's much broader than that, as evidenced by the Vice Admiral's attendance at this year's annual Space Symposium in Colorado, which is where State Secrets caught up with him. Vice Admiral Whitworth, it's so nice to have you here. Thank you for taking the time.
I'm honored, Suzanne, and thank you. I'm humbled, and I'll have an opportunity at your great ceremony to pay homage to the people that lift me up every single day. And so I just want to thank you in advance for giving me an opportunity to say thanks to them.
Well, that's wonderful. We're looking forward to that as well. You know, I thought we'd talk about artificial intelligence because that's been such a sort of buzzword. It's much more than that to you as you're really figuring out new and innovative ways to incorporate the technology at the crazy rate that it's developing into the mission at NGA, which is to inform both the intelligence community and the Department of Defense. You have a really unique mission there. Talk to us a little bit about how we're progressing in terms of bringing AI into that mission.
Absolutely. It's the natural question. We all want a report card. And there are some metrics. Before I skip to them, though, I think it's probably important just to baseline what we do with AI and ML in this business, in this tradecraft of imagery analysis, and in some cases, just GeoInt writ large. So we train models, okay? And so the idea here is something called computer vision. I think most listeners would be able to relate to computer vision when they go through TSA, global entry, and there's a camera, it seizes your likeness, it compares it probably to your passport, and then we all marvel as you walk through without even breaking out your passport because it has completely matched you. That's computer vision. I wish we had an easy one like that, though. The task that we have involves an infinitesimal amount of the percentage of a field of view. To give you an idea, when you walk through global entry, your face is about 80% of that field of view of that particular camera, that sensor. We're searching for things that are being denied. They're being hidden. These are secrets that people want to maintain in other countries. And secondly, they're really, really small compared to the big field of view when you're taking a picture from space. So we approximate this. Anybody who wants to do the math, it's not going to be 100% correct, but we approximate this at about 0.02% of the field of view for something that we need to delineate its identity. So we do that through this process called computer vision. For years and years, humans have been doing this with their own processing unit known as the brain. And now we're trying to do this so that we can do it faster with more of the land available or the sea for the review to come up with something that, in the case of our warning mission, is anomalous, different from the baseline that we've seen over the past. In the targeting mission, something that needs perhaps to be distinct, combatants from non-combatants, enemy from non-enemy, adversary from non-adversary. These are very, very important prerogatives of the Commander-in-Chief, of the Secretary of Defense, and of combatant commanders. So we take this process very seriously, and it takes humans to train the machine to ensure that it's right. So when we send all the data that comes from collection through these models, we run something called inference in the computer vision process that yields detections. And the best way to measure what kind of a year you're having is to measure how quickly you're running inference. And at the unclassified level, I'm going to tell you it's been a good year. Our latency, so this issue is called latency. Our latency has improved 80% just in 1 year.
Wow.
So we've had this be a program of record for just over a year. I think that's a pretty good track record, but we're never completely satisfied. Mm-hmm. More and more data will be running through. We have a good problem in the United States right now in an increasing constellation. So think about the normal stuff that you would consider national technical means, which is best in class, of course. Think about an emerging constellation called the proliferated architecture, and that's where Space Force has been instrumental in leadership. Think about commercial collection out there. Think also about what international partners might be able to contribute. That's the entire denominator that leads to ultimately a good problem of a data deluge. Mm-hmm. So as we have additional data and we run additional inference with all kinds of models for different situations, I think what we're going to face next year, if we have this conversation and you want to know what kind of years has it been, my guess is it will also be an improvement in latency, but we're going to have some challenges when it comes to compute. And computational power is very, very much the buzz, and that's appropriate when you're talking about this much data.
Yeah. Let's talk about you're joining us from Colorado Springs, Colorado, where you're speaking at the Space Symposium on the relationship between Space Force and the NGA and how the two of you are collaborating. So it's not just the Earth anymore, which used to be NGA's mission, but now it includes space. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks for this question, because it's one of the main reasons that I felt it was important to come here. And I've offered to several of the audiences here that NGA relies on the warfighting domain of space, and likewise, the warfighting domain of space relies on NGA. So we changed our motto to read "From Seabed to Space," and this was just about 2.5 years ago, and it was the right thing to do to remind people that we look up, not just down. We're not just looking at the rock. We're not just looking at the Earth itself, but we are also looking up. And this issue of distinction, which you and I just talked about, this issue of distinction applies up there as well. We have to distinguish equipment. We have to distinguish behaviors. And so it is appropriate for the United States Space Force Vice Chief and I to be on the stage together. In the past, we've seen some allusions in media to there being some sort of strife or some sort of a growing pain. And I think that, while that might have been true in the past, right now we're on a very good run, and we wanted to articulate that very, very publicly. And we did, I think, a nice job today of showing how excited we are to be partners, and where we're working on some agreements on the use of especially commercial collection in space, and that the future is very, very good, especially when you use innovation for centers like we were talking about in the Joint Mission Management Center. I think the last time you and I talked, it was just a glimmer in our eye. Now it's very real. It's at what we call IOC, Initial Operating Capability, where there are guardians working with NGA and the people who do tasking of these satellites to ensure that we know the entire denominator. And before any pixel is bought or any analysis is bought, any task is rendered, we make sure that as good stewards of taxpayer money, we're not paying twice. And so it's good for warfighting, it's good for speed, and it's been really, really good for the relationship between NGA and the United States Space Force.
The future of national security is here. Introducing the Cipher Briefs NatSec Edge Conference, June 5th through 6th, 2025 in Austin, Texas. Join leaders from intelligence, defense, private industry, and investment as they explore the innovations shaping tomorrow's world. Gain critical insights, connect with top minds, and shape the future of security in an interconnected world. Don't just witness the future, be a part of it. Secure your spot now at natsekedge.com.
How have you seen the thinking change, let's just say over the past year to choose a time frame, when it comes to incorporating the private sector into these new collaborative efforts? Some of them have been ongoing, of course, but they're just evolving. How are you thinking about the private sector as a partner now as your mission continues to evolve?
They're so essential. We learn from each other. I think in the issue of speed, when it comes to acquisition, all of us are still learning and trying new things. And since the last time you and I talked, we've been using CSOs. So I'll give you a good one. If you're familiar with this commercial solutions offerings, it's kind of like a pre-vetted relationship that allows you to move very quickly when something appeals to your mission, right? And so the CSO, known as Project Egger, has been employed for maritime domain awareness, and that has afforded us better speed than we would have had in the past. And that was in direct relationship to a requirement uttered by one of our primary combatant commands. In this case, it would be Indo-PACOM. So that's a great example. Something I've been researching here recently and talking about are these bailment agreements. So we don't have very many, but this is even for smaller organizations who have never had a relationship with the U.S. government, want to see what it's like, see if they're cut out for it. We want to evaluate them. And it gives them kind of a more limited test, just of purpose, to see if we're made for each other. And so bailment is so small. I'm not even going to tell you like some of the organizations or commercial entities that go through that, because we're all testing each other.
Yeah, sort of get to know you dating phase before the bigger opportunities to collaborate there. I want to ask you too about some of the things that have been in the headlines. You know, we heard earlier this year at the Worldwide Threats hearing that the new administration is putting a focus on drug trafficking, on stopping drug trafficking along the border as one of their priorities. And it seems like NGA is really ideally positioned to help understand what's happening there. What can you tell us about that?
What I like about your question is that it gives me an opportunity to at least express to your listenership that we do learn from our experiences. And so we had 2 decades of concerted activity-based intelligence during the counterterrorism years. And some of that actually does apply to the problem set that you're describing, how to ensure that we can detect and ultimately help our law enforcement partners with this scourge. And it's happening as we speak. Many of the briefings that I take as we listen to the commander-in-chief's priorities and we react, and we do activity-based intelligence and I would say behavior-based intelligence, it transports me back to the days when I was in Afghanistan. It transports me back to the days in Iraq, whereas we were hunting terrorists and trying to localize that activity and ensure that it had a proper end. It does feel as though we're utilizing our best practices.
Let me ask you, you're one of my favorite people to talk to about the Arctic as well, because I know that NGA has been really focused on the Arctic and sort of mapping that region. What can you tell us about that? Greenland's been in the news, and I think people understand that Greenland is a gateway, if you will, to what China and Russia are actually doing in the Arctic. Let's talk for just a minute about that mission.
So what's nice about the Arctic is we have a responsibility to know the Arctic and to understand the navigability of the Arctic, just because we have a responsibility for safety of navigation. Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily about climate or climate change or anything like that. It's because we need to ensure that we monitor all the ice. We need to ensure that for people who rely on our data, that we understand the poles, because frankly, most of the change regarding the Earth occurs at the poles. That has an effect on the spin rate of the Earth, the topography that yields ultimately accuracy. So we have a responsibility to understand the Arctic. Break. Now from a strategic competitive perspective, yes, we must absolutely invest in time and energy dedicated to knowing when navigability is changing and what that will portend either for the Russians or the Chinese and their behaviors up there. And so we do have a responsibility there, and I never tire of talking about it. I hope that at least addresses your question.
Yeah. So we started the conversation talking about AI and the ways that you've been using AI in government and bringing in private sector partners. As we kind of wrap up our conversation, and I'll ask you, of course, for anything you'd like to add, but I always like, my favorite question for you is, what do you see coming? Because I think you see more than a lot of people, and you have the ability to connect these dots and understanding the challenges. You know, what do you do when you're swimming in data? But what do you see coming in the next 6 to 12 months? What should we be thinking about?
It's a great question, especially since we just talked about the Arctic. And by the way, we do use some AI and computer vision approaches to help us with ice floes, for an example there. But when it comes to targeting, our marquee item obviously is NGA Maven, and we're making great progress. We mentioned latency, and that's been demonstrated by NGA Maven here recently. Warning is where we're trying to take the best of targeting and the best practices of AI ML and targeting and applying it to the big kind of behemoth problem that is warning, to cite when something is anomalous in this earth of ours. And I would just tell you that we're also looking for ways to improve our confidence. So I've been a targeting professional now for almost 36 years, and I'm always looking for the most positive identification to ensure that it's not just based on one source. I'm trying to ensure that we have multiple sources overlapping that point to a high confidence positive identification. I will tell you that GeoInt is very good on its own, and so I trust GeoInt and especially our people, but it's always nice when you can add layers. Adding layers is where we're making progress as we speak in AI and ML, and I think 1 year from now, if we talk again, I hope we do, we will talk about multimodal and its impact on our readiness. We have at least 3 multimodal tests going on right now, and they are actually showing that this is going to make a difference in our speed and the completeness of positive identification, which will in turn help us with analysis. It will help us with exploitation, targeting. It will help us indirectly with our collection and our tasking, because you have to understand where to look in order to have good collection and good exploitation. It's kind of the left-hand, right-hand relationship that we have as the functional manager for GeoInt. So I'm excited about multimodal right now and the application of AI for the future.
So if you were explaining multimodal to someone who may not have a crisp understanding of what it is, how would you describe it?
It's layers. It's taking several layers and ensuring that a model can actually translate a computer vision, solution to what might be something in text. So generative AI, Gen AI, as a lot of people are talking about, that's a lot of text. It's very agile because text is light. It's not as dense as an image. But a lot of times those models don't necessarily understand the data inherent to what we do with location or what computer vision does with regard to a physical image. We're now starting to find ways that multimodal allows those things to talk to each other. And some of these are showing great promise, and it will allow us simply to have a conversation with these models, have a conversation with these applications. And we're using NGA Maven as one of the best test cases of that. And I think that for all the COCOMs, they should find this very promising in target development and the rest of the targeting cycle. But the same is true on warning. We have to be correct. This is a no-fail mission when it comes to warning and positive identification, so it makes total sense that multimodal, combining layers, is being done at NGA.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you think about where we are right now and how quickly technology is developing and how quickly the government and agencies like yours at NGA are incorporating this into the mission of both, as you said, for intelligence, but for warning as well. All right, the last question goes to you. What is it that I didn't ask you that you'd most want to tell us?
I think that, how to summarize, I would say that no matter what year I might have been associated with this organization, I would dote on these people, and I would dote on this organization with 2 words: objectivity and efficiency. Objectivity. There's hardly anything more objective in some cases than an image. And it's a privilege to be with these people who can take some images that really aren't that clear, but yet they are able to make sense of them. And so oftentimes it might seem as though, well, is this a shaped outcome? Absolutely not, because we're just reading the image. We're just calling balls and strikes. And so I love the objectivity of our organization, the collaborative nature that brings as well with other ints out there like SIGINT and HUMINT. And then there's this efficiency piece. And this is the part that, it's hard for me to dote on because I would have to cite exact numbers, but make no mistake that over the last 15 years, this organization has taken a very large increase in terabytes coming from space in an emerging constellation with very little in the way of an increasing budget, and they've made it work. And it's largely been through some of the things we've talked about: computer vision, AI, automation, et cetera. Now we're going to find a very serious challenge of the same variety, but in half the time. In about 7 years, a very serious increase in the number of terabytes coming from space. And obviously, we're going to try to do it in these times where we're keeping our workforce at a manageable level. And that will be the true test case of our ingenuity, our innovation, the use of some of the approaches like we've talked about today with AI.
Yeah. Vice Admiral Frank Whitworth is Director of the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency, and congratulations to you once again, sir, for being chosen as one of the honorees for this year's Cipher Brief Awards dinner, and particularly for bringing innovation into government. It's such a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk to you today.
The honor is mine. Thank you, Suzanne.